Monsieur Edouard Coukierman, Minister Pierre Lelouch, distinguished guests, dear friends, welcome to Israel, welcome to the Holy Land, welcome to the Promised Land, welcome to the land of milk and honey, and these days to the land of natural gas. I shall not go into economics. This you will know better to do than I. But I'll try to provide, in the short minutes I have, a couple of viewpoints, of perspectives, as what are we doing here in this corner of the world? And perhaps a few words on the nature of this corner. The famous historian Baber Tuchman wrote the following thing: Israel is the only nation in the world that is governing itself in the same territory, under the same name, and with the same religion and same language as it did 3,000 years ago. And I should add, with the same undivided capital, Jerusalem, that our former Prime Minister, Mr. Begin, used to call it like Washington, he called it Jerusalem, D.C., David's capital. We were, for 2,000 years, dispersed in the world, although we still had always here a Jewish community in this country, sometimes bigger, sometimes smaller. And Europe had a tremendous contribution to establishing of this state. In the previous century, it was Balfour, the foreign minister of Britain, who came with this declaration in November 2, 1917, saying, His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievements of this object. Well, Britain is always the first, but not during this time. It was Napoleon who almost 120 years before that, upon being here in this country, after his adventure in the Middle East, came with a declaration about a letter that he wrote to the Jews. It was the Proclamation à la Nation Juive. And he wrote the following thing. I'll just note some. Being here, he called the Jewish community that was here, he said, hasten, now is the moment to claim the restoration of civic rights amongst the population of the universe, which had been shamefully withheld from you for thousands of years. Your political existence as a nation among the nations and the unlimited natural right to worship. As he said in French, héritière légitime de la Palestine. Well, this was followed naturally by the decision, the resolution about the mandate of Palestine by the League of Nations that brought all of this historical sentiments and truth to a formal resolution that for the first time put in writing, in international law, the right of the Jewish people to a state here. And in Article 2, at the mandate of Palestine, explicitly states that the mandatory should be responsible for placing the country under such political, administrative, and economic conditions as will secure the establishment of the Jewish national home. Despite Arab opposition, it was unanimously approached by the League of Nations, by 51 nations, majority of Europeans. Well, it's interesting to know how this place, including Tel Aviv that you're visiting these days, looked 50 years before of that. In 1867, Mark Twain visited this place. And he, for example, describes the Galilee in the following things. Come to the Galilee. In these unpeopled deserts, these rusty mounds of barrenness, that melancholy ruin of Capernaum, this stupid village of Tiberias, stumbling under its 6 funeral plums of palms, yonder desolate declivity, and on and on and on. And he describes the country as being empty and being yellow. You can ride for miles and miles and you will not come across a human being. Well, go to this country today, go to the Galilee, and see this unpeopled desert, rusty mounds of barrenness, stupid village of Tiberias. See what huge difference you see in this country today than used to be 100 and 150 years ago. What is the difference? What made the difference was Zionism, the national movement for self-determination of the Jewish people. This was an endeavor of historical justice. And Martin Luther King referred to it in the following words: how easy it should be to understand and support the right of the Jewish people to live in their ancient land of Israel. All men of goodwill will exult in the fulfillment of God's promise that his people should return in joy to rebuild their plundered land. This is Zionism, nothing more, nothing less. And what we do these days, we continue to build our home, our homeland. That's what we do here, and this is what you see. And we continue to build our country with problems, with toil, with tears, but with joy, with this feeling of inner privilege, and above all, with spirit. Now, where do we do it? What does this corner of the world looks like? It has been described over the past few years as the Arab Spring. That we in Israel were yearning to see democracy and tranquility and stability all around the Middle East. But what is really happening is this huge earthquake that is shaking the area in this vast territorial span from the Atlantic in the west to the Persian Gulf and beyond in the east. It's a conflict of historical proportions, titanic. We do not know exactly where it is going to lead us to. And what we see in the surrounding Arab and Muslim countries is this huge conflict between radical Islam and nation states. And within countries, what we see those conflicts between ethnic groups, clans, tribes, between Sunni denomination and Shiite denomination, and this still goes on. In a Middle East that has been described by Sadat of Egypt, the late great president. He said, Egypt is the only Arab country. All the rest are tribes with flags. And we should also note that without exception, in every place where democratic election took place, the country turned into the law of Sharia. This was described by one of the leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood in Libya, who said that democracy is much like slippers. When we reach the bathtub, we take them off. And when we look at what's happening here, which is touching Europe, which is touching the entire world, of course Israel, we see Muslim Brotherhood with some more extreme elements, those of Al-Qaeda and the Salafis and all the rest of them. Well, they don't view democracy and those values that we are raising our kids to believe in, of democracy, of freedom, of human decency, of rule of law, as values that have to be followed and defended. They view that as an opposite rival culture that has to be replaced. At the moment, many focus on the Arab world and make changes over there. But they are looking to the Western world, to our culture to be replaced. And with Iran, it is most clear. If you would listen to the speeches of Ahmadinejad in the United Nations and what they say, and you read what they write, they don't just view a world without Israel, they view a world without democracy. And Iran is also developing nuclear capabilities and terror sponsorship to promote those objectives. Now, this is the Middle East surrounding us, in which nation upon nation have crumbled before our very eyes. And I speak about countries like Syria and Iraq and Lebanon and Egypt and Libya and Tunisia and Yemen, and this list goes on. And by crumbling, I mean not just their governmental regime, but also complete disregard of basic human and natural values. The set of values has gone bankrupt. And if we look on this Middle East that we are doing business in, and which is affecting the rest of the world, we don't know exactly where it is going to lead us, but the general characteristics of this place are that it is becoming more radical, more religiously Islamic, more extreme, less stable, with huge economic problems, and more world jihad and extreme terror organizations from all over the world are coming and are trying to shake the area. And when it comes to human rights, well, we are not in the center of Europe. Human lives don't mean much. Human rights are disregarded. Women's rights, homosexuals' rights, rights of minorities. In this place, there is no mercy for the weak. Only limited value to signed agreements, as was described by our president, Mr. Perez. He said that the number of agreements violated in the Middle East is equal to the number of agreements signed in the Middle East. And the only reliable and stable, strong, true ally of the West, of the democratic West, is Israel. And the paradox is that our stability and strength is critically important to the stability and security of countries in the Arab world which are still friendly with the West. I mean Saudi Arabia and Jordan and the Gulf Emirates and Bahrain. Let me just point here that Europe and Israel share same values of democracy, of freedom, of human rights, of rule of law. We are all committed to open economy with sensitivity to the weak and the needy. And the cooperation between Europe and Israel has been on a constant increase in the past few decades, commercially, on industrial level, science and technology, also on the intelligence level when it comes to combating terrorism. But these days, more and more than in the past, we both are exposed to increasing terror threats which are on the rise all the time, including those threats of non-conventional terror activity. All of the events in the Middle East simply show that the Palestinian problem really hasn't much to do with it. They're totally disregarded. But we wish to have peace with them. And if you'll be here in Israel and you will listen to the debates that we have amongst ourselves, these aren't debates between those who are for peace or those who are against peace. Everyone who has been born in this country wants to have peace. We all have been serving in the army and we all have been fighting wars, and now we have our kids and our grandkids. And no one takes chances on that. And the debate in the country is between those who think this way would be better or that way would be better.